here's Derek Wong. Thank you, Derek.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's start about you first. Tell us about yourself. I know that it's not your first time to visit here in the Philippines, so maybe you can also discuss.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I just learned from Steve that we have one more thing in common. I'm also a Canadian citizen, but I was actually born in Hong Kong as well. So I guess that's how we have in common. So I was born in Hong Kong, and I grew up there until I was 13, I think, and then I spent my teenage years in Montreal, Canada. And after that, I moved to the U.S. for undergrad on the East Coast originally. And then I flew out to the West Coast, to California for a graduate school, a PhD program. And I just stayed there because the weather was so nice. So I spent a few years in grad school doing bioengineering. And originally, I actually started graduate school thinking I was going to be a professor because I was interested in just teaching and academia in general. But what occurred to me while I was in graduate school was that academia works in a very slow fashion. So I always tell people that when I started graduate school, people were barely getting on Google, Facebook didn't exist, and by the time I finished graduate school, everybody's on Facebook, everybody has a smartphone. So I knew there was something wrong with how academia worked, at least in my book, and I knew I wanted to be part of the outside world and work on a much faster-paced environment. That's the one part of it. The other part of it was that I noticed in my graduate school work, a lot of researchers were studying very fundamentally difficult problems, and they were trying to come up with solutions for how to cure diseases or how to build a diagnostic to do a test that's much cheaper and faster. And whenever they present a poster or a talk, they would say, well, we've developed this new technology, and you can, in a couple years' time, it's so cheap that you will find it in the pharmacy. But I kept waiting. Every time I go to a pharmacy, I don't see those technologies. I started wondering, what the heck is going on if it's so easy? It's already done in the lab. Why can't you just sell it, find a distributor and just sell it? And as I looked into it, I realized that part of transferring technology from the university to the real world, a lot of it has to do with the business of transferring technologies. Turns out the business of technology is a very difficult problem to solve, and it was very interesting to me. So while in graduate school, I started worked on a lot of entrepreneurship programs, and also helped some of the startups that are being spun out from the graduate programs to help them find ways to speed up the transfer and start companies up. So that's how I got my feet wet in entrepreneurship and the business side of technology. After graduate school, I had a chance to intern at Wong Company, and I can tell you more about it in a sec. And I kind of started there, and then eventually was brought on board full-time, and I was there until a week ago. So I spent about 3 years in venture capital. Wong Company is a life science venture capital firm. So when people think about venture capital, they think about investors that invested in Facebook and Google and all the companies that whose products you probably use and love and you know about from the news. But actually, there's also a very healthy community of venture capitalists that invest specifically in life sciences. So these are investors that invest in drug technologies or new diagnostic tests or health services and so on. But what has been happening is that the advances in digital technologies, such as mobile phones, social networking, analytics, all these things that now you kind of take for granted because everybody has a smartphone, everybody is on social network, and everybody is connected in some way, fundamentally has changed everybody's lives, right? And those things also change, or began to change healthcare as well, even though we don't really think about it. So at the firm, we started thinking about what does digital technology mean to healthcare, and we started exploring whether there are investment opportunities in that regard. So at the firm, I focus everything that's, I was a digital guy. So basically anything that's not a drug and that has, that's married to a mobile phone, I got to see and I got to evaluate and I got to invest in. And so that's what I did.
As a VC there, tell us about maybe the exciting startups or ideas that you've come across.
Sure. So there, my office is based in San Francisco, okay, which is kind of the hub of a lot of the technology development. And so for the last 3 years, probably saw 1,000+ companies. I kind of lost track. I talked to and really did a lot of diligence on 400+ companies. And a lot of these companies are really coming up with new ways of doing things that have never been done before in healthcare. So one of the first investments that at the firm that we invested in the digital health area is a company called LifeCore. And I can show you what that means. So basically, you know, I see people with smartphones, and some of you guys have iPhones, and a lot of people are very worried about dropping the phone, so they buy a silicone case to protect it or to make it look nicer, right? So LifeCore is a company that has developed a silicone case, except it's a silicone case that's also has electronics built in. So what it does is it has electronics that allows this to measure your electrocardiogram, so the ECG or EKG, depending on how you spell the word. So if you've studied biology or if you've seen TV, you know that the EKG is essentially one of the more important biometric of your health condition, right? So by having this case, I actually don't have an iPhone. You can use it with an iPhone Touch as well. But when you pair it with an iOS device, by turning on an app, show you what it does. So basically now, just holding onto it, it will start doing a recording of my beating heart. It makes for a really great, you know, bar conversation. Let me show you my and you can see my heart rate is a little, you know, a little up. I'm a little excited, but I swear to you, I'm pretty healthy. But so what you see here is essentially my electrocardiogram, and I don't know if anyone in the audience has a healthcare or biology background. Essentially, this is the lead one of a 12-lead ECG. So if you think about, if you've never watched TV, or I hope that you all have healthy hearts that have never had to be hooked up to a machine, but whenever a heart patient needs to have their heart checked, they need to be hooked up to this machine, and there are many leads, right? So one of the leads, the major lead is called lead 1, which is the rhythm strip. So this is the data that the cardiologist or doctor would look at first to kind of screen whether you have a problem or not. If this lead is okay, then your heart is pretty much okay. If there's abnormality of this, then they start looking at the other leads to see what conditions you might have. So that's the first company that we invested in. And what is interesting was that when this company came to us, it was really a company of 4 co-founders, 2 of them in Oklahoma, US, and 2 of them in Australia. They actually met at a conference where they realized that they were kind of working on the same idea, so they kind of joined forces, formed this company. And so it was an international company from day one, and it was kind of interesting in that way. Another interesting tidbit is that this company is one of the first mobile health company that is FDA cleared, so it's completely clinical. It's now being deployed. Doctors use them at the hospitals, but also they prescribe this to the heart patients, so patients can use it at home. So what's really exciting, I think, is if you think about what smartphone has done to us, is that basically it's given computing and sensing to all of us 24/7. The moment you think about it, the moment you wake up, the first thing you touch is probably the smartphone because you want to check your email updates and your Facebook status. And you carry with you, so it has all the status, it knows exactly where you are, it knows what you're doing, how much you're moving. And it's the last thing you put down because the last thing you do before you go to sleep is to say goodnight to your friends, right? So and it has all the sensors built in and all the connectivity and the computing. So if you're a new company trying to do something in healthcare, now you actually don't have to build a new little computer like you used to, where you think of the big machine, you have to build a computer and then build the sensing parts, which make this machine really expensive. Now you can leverage this really smart, very powerful device and focus on the really necessary piece, which is this, and make it extremely low cost. Even this is already kind of free to everyone, right? Because everyone just bought one for themselves anyway. So that's what smartphone technologies, digital technologies have offered all the mobile health and digital health companies a way to develop products much quicker, much cheaper, much more capital efficient.
What are the emerging trends in the healthcare industry that you can probably share to us?
Sure.
Based on your experience reviewing and vetting investments in the US.
Sure. So it's a very broad question, so I'll try to touch on a few points as I can think of them. I think one of the trends is that we're now at an age where we want information. So I think healthcare has always been a very isolated kind of interaction. So if you think about the last time you go to a doctor, so the last time you think about healthcare is probably during a routine checkup or when you're sick. And you don't really think about healthcare, I mean, unless you're a very health-conscious person where you go to the gym every day and you constantly do this kind of checking. Healthcare has always been very, you only consume it at distinct moments in time. But with all these devices coming out and with all the sensors that are on us, even if you don't have a device like this, even if you just have your iOS, latest iPhone or your Android phone, there are built-in sensors that can tell you how much you've walked that day. So just having that ability to sense what you're doing gives you the ability to do something for your health on a continuous day-to-day basis. So what does that mean? Well, having sensors are great, it creates a lot of data, but now you can think about really leveraging all the data about your activity, your health, but also coupled with other things that you may not think are relevant to your health, but create context about your health and well-being. So I think the fact that we consume so much information for all the other parts like social media, SMS, emails, we're now getting to the point where we also want to consume this healthcare information when it's delivered to us on a mobile phone. So that's one area. So since I'm a U.S. investor, so in the U.S. there's something going on which is called Obamacare. The healthcare system is changing a lot. So part of the change, the effect of the change is that consumers are bearing a lot more of the cost of healthcare compared to what they have been before. So consumers are really driven to stay healthy now, especially since insurance rates overall will increase. And, not because of Obamacare really, but because healthcare expenses have increased dramatically over the last 20 years to the point where it's really unsustainable. So Obamacare is really there to slow down the increase of the healthcare insurance, healthcare costs. But healthcare insurance costs will still rise. So what happens is that consumers need to take better care of themselves outside of the hospital setting. So what does that mean? Well, if you're a diabetic, you might have to measure your glucose, your sugar level on a day-to-day basis because you don't want to eat. If you have too much sugar, it's not good. Too little, it's not good. You might faint. Something serious might happen to you. In reality, if you look at how people manage themselves, what you'll find is that they might measure sporadically because it's really inconvenient. And on top of that, the doctor will usually ask the patient to keep a really careful log of your glucose level. Except you'll find that most people will start, the week after you come out from the doctor's appointment, you'll be very diligent. By the second week, you do it 3 times. And by the third week, you kind of forget about it. And then, at your next follow-up 3 months later, you realize, oops, I haven't filled in my logbook. So in the parking lot, right before you go into the doctor's office, you kind of fill in something as though you've done this when you haven't. And of course, the doctors know this because the doctor will measure it and realize you've not been honest. But with technology like this, what you can imagine is something very seamless, very easy, because once you make a measurement, it's logged, it's sent to the cloud, so you don't have to do much more, you don't have to interact with it too much more, and you have all the data at hand. On top of that, because data are sitting on the cloud, right, so you can apply analytics and actually apply the right feedback to the consumer or the patient when something bad is about to happen. Think about it. You don't have to wait till your appointment in 3 months' time before you get a feedback from the doctor. In this case, it could be a machine, it could be a doctor reading in the back end, reading the data, but there could be intervention before your next appointment. So while you're still sitting at home thinking that you can get away with not measuring your blood glucose, or you can eat that extra piece of chocolate cake, the device will tell you, well, measure glucose, and you shouldn't touch this because your blood glucose is rising, so do something about it.
And as an investor, what are the things that you look for when you're investing in a startup?
So I think there are many things that we look for. I think every company is different, so it's very hard to put a blanket criteria. If you hit all 5 things, you can't really have a specific checklist. That said, I think there's a few things that are absolutely essential, and if you don't have those elements, it's definitely a no. First and foremost, I think, is the team. So I think the way I think about companies is that people are the ones that come up with the ideas. People are the ones that build the technologies. People are the ones that put together all these ideas and technologies into a company, into a product, and execute on them so that they can put it to use. So I've also seen people killing ideas and killing companies. So at the end of the day, I think having the right team, having the right founders, and really the ones that are complementing each other very well, and can work together very well through the thick and thin, through the good times and the bad. But that's paramount. The other is a company that's really tackling something that is very meaningful. So especially since I focus on healthcare investment, so I can easily say no to the companies that want to show me another photo sharing app. I think it's now so easy to start a company that there are a lot of copycats. So when I'm in San Francisco, at a cafe, I hear startups pitching to angel investors all the time, and I overhear them, and it's yet another recipe app or photo sharing app or something that has been done before. And it might be interesting. They might have a great design, and they might have a little bit of initial traction. But to me, it really doesn't solve real life problems. And I think companies that are really solving fundamental problems, either it could be something that you couldn't do before. So if you think about a company like AliveCore, it's really solving a problem for heart patients, because they would have no other way of measuring their heart condition outside of the hospital, right? So you either spend a lot of time in the hospital, or you just don't have it. So it's solving a really big problem, and it's a fundamental problem. Or you can think about transactions like payroll hero, where there are already information flow that needs to happen, transactions that need to happen, but there's just no good solution out there. And you know that you can build technology to solve those inefficiencies in a way that is very scalable. That's very attractive. And also, to me, it's a little bit about leveraging data to solve what I call the information asymmetry. So we all know a lot about little bits of everything. And so kind of taking the payroll hero example, you have the timestamp data, you have the payroll data, you have all these other data, the traffic data that are not talking to each other. But once you put them together, you realize that they actually, there's a connection among them, and you can build something meaningful with them. In healthcare, there's a great example, a company called Ginger.io, which does something very interesting. So what they do is it's a healthcare company, digital health company, where they leverage the sensors in your smartphone to evaluate your health. And you would say, well, Nokia iPhone, they're not designed to measure health. What are you talking about? Well, they actually use the accelerometer, and they study your texting, your Facebook, your tweeting patterns to understand your emotions and your health. And you can think about it. Let's say you're a teenager that's been diagnosed to be a little bit depressed. It turns out that when you're in the depressed state, you tend to be kind of quiet, you tend to sit still, you tend to not talk to your friends, you don't text that much. On a healthier, happier day, you would do a lot more of those. Just by I don't think Facebook, when Mark Zuckerberg started the company, thought about this could be used in healthcare, but when you put all these data together, actually you can create something meaningful that's very interesting. So, there are really new ways of processing the data, putting them together and do something greater. And if you can find those connections and do something great, solving real problems, I think that's fantastic.
Based on your observation, being here for just a day, what are the differences between Philippine-based startups and startups in the US?
So I've been here just a day plus, and I just realized it's 4:40 in the morning. So I think I don't know I probably don't have the right answer because I haven't seen enough startups in the Philippines. But I think there are a lot of interesting ideas that are being started here, and I want to kind of address the point that every geographic region has its own problems and own issues, right? So while there are some problems that are universal to the entire globe, such as finding better ways to communicate each other. So you can use SMS as a technology that's universal. Facebook is fairly universal. But each geographic region will have something unique. So you will have to find ways to solve those unique problems. Even Facebook, think about it. Everyone consumes Facebook differently. In the US, for a long time, Facebook was a web company. And then smartphones came along, it became a mobile app company. But still, in the rest of the world, where they've connected 1 billion people, when they think about connecting the next 1 billion people, where a lot of them are still on regular phones, they have to find ways to implement it in a non-smartphone, right? A traditional phone. So even if it's something very universal, you need to solve the problems that are unique. So I see a lot of startups here solving very unique problems that are here, and that's very interesting. So I think that's kind of the main difference I see so far.